Now the situation is very much generated by the terrible past.
Ukraine has been united country only for about 70 years, so there are two parts of Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine, and they have a lot of differences between themselves. Different politics, orange and blue, different languages, Russian and Ukrainian. The roots of the anti-Semitism of the both parts of Ukraine are also somewhat different. For centuries, Ukraine was under the rule of the Polish nobles, who used Ukrainians as serfs to till their land. Since the Jews tended to be better educated, they were managers of the nobles' estates.
So the Jews were sort of working for the Poles in terms of collecting rent money from Ukrainian peasants.
Also, Polish nobles farmed out tax collection and alcohol production to the Jews. And in fact, Jews held a monopoly on the production and distribution of alcohol in Ukraine.
So the Jews also were in control of many bars, which sometimes led to tension with Ukrainians.
It is Jews right here in Harlem who run these whiskey stores that get you drunk. It is Jews that run these old run-down stores that sell you bad food.
Great-grandfather, he was, as a lot of men in Ukraine, and he was very passionate about drinking a lot of alcohol. And so, but at that point, the Ukrainians, because of being farmers, they didn't make a lot of money. So all the money he made, he would go to this bar that was called Shinok or Korchma in Ukraine, and there were a Jew always.
They would sometimes take advantage of Ukrainians. They would sometimes overcharge people in order to make some money for themselves before they handed over what they needed to hand over to the Poles in terms of taxes.
It is Jews who control the economy of Holland and use it for themselves and for the benefit of Israel, and think we're going to be blind to what they're doing to us. No, someone better pull their coat. Someone better pull their coat. Well, you start pulling some heads.
When people couldn't pay them back, they would take their land. So
the Ukrainians had a lot of resentment for the Jews, who were sort of above them on their own territory.
Of course, many Ukrainians hated Polish rule, and in 1648 there was a massive uprising led by a Ukrainian Cossack general named Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who is now a national hero in Ukraine. Thousands and thousands of Poles were killed, but since Jews were seen as working with Poles, the Ukrainians killed tens of thousands of them as well.
Но это был вопрос социальный. Били социальных врагов. Шинкарей, арендаторов, экономов, пиявок народных.
After a few years, Khmelnytsky started losing the war and he allied himself with Russia. But all that he did was to cause the Cossacks to lose their influence in Ukraine, and eventually Poland and Russia just divided the country between themselves. When the empire began to crumble during World War I, anger and resentment reached a flashpoint. Jews heavily supported the Bolsheviks and became disproportionately represented in the state administration and secret police. Communists and Jews were the same thing.
Out of 548 national commissars, how they were called back in those days, 448 were Jewish.
Евреи все коммунисты, но доля евреев была еще большая.
Lenin died in 1924. Joseph Stalin came to power and started programs of forced farm collectivization, trying to bring all land under state control. Most of Ukraine's economy at the time was agricultural, and the Ukrainians heavily resisted. As punishment, Stalin gave them unrealistic orders for grain deliveries, and the result, in the fall of 1932, peasants had almost all of their food confiscated.
Every single Ukrainian family today would probably tell you that they had a relative who starved to death.